Hello ladies and gentlemen, Willie here. So, how hard is tier 5 actually? This was a type of video that I used to do in Classic that I've been looking forward to bringing back for TBC. So 2 weeks after the opening of a new raid tier, we take a look at the numbers and try and gauge an impression of how difficult the tier has been overall. I didn't bother with tier 4 because it was fresh out the gates for the expansion, people level at different rates, and to be honest I wouldn't really bother with 10-man content anyway, and the other 3 bosses were fairly quick and most people got them done easily enough. The way we get the numbers is we take the boss, usually an opening boss in the tier, that has the largest number of clears and use that as our baseline progress clear point, and then look at each boss after that and see what percentage of guilds who were able to clear the first boss went on to clear the last. To give you some idea of how things looked back in Classic, by the end of the second reset, about 65% of guilds had managed to clear the instance. Moving forwards to AQ40, there was a predictable drop-off, with the optional bosses actually being more difficult. 47% of guilds with defeated Skyrim had gone on to beat Cthulhu, whereas Viscidus was much lower with 24% success rate. In Naxx, the peak of vanilla raiding, the Spider Quarter had an absolutely enormous clear rate, whereas only 19% of guilds who had at least cleared one boss within Naxx had gone on to clear 15 out of 15. So the question is, will tier 5 have a lower completion percentage than that? And it's worth a mention as well that TBC obviously is 25-man raiding instead of 40, so we should expect to see more clears overall than we did with Classic. Hope all that makes sense. So we need our baseline number. Then the easiest boss that had the most clears in tier 5 is Voidreaver with 10,602 clears. Leotheris living up to his name. Now you may hear this and think, but how? Surely you have to do this starting boss. Well, turns out you can skip Alar if you really want to. I looked through a bunch of the logs and sure enough, plenty of wipes on Alar and then guilds just go straight past him. I imagine this happened because people got as far as they could in SSC and then before the reset ended wanted to go to TK and get whatever loot that they could. Also think people forgot to log on Hydros a little bit because Hydros is very close behind with 10,524 clears. Not surprising, it's a much easier opening boss than Alar. All you have to do is take your hands off the keyboard when the boss is crossing over to the other side when the threat drop happens, and you'll be fine. Never had any problems with that, totally. Very close behind Hydros is Leotheris the Blind with 10,425 clears. Again, you can skip Lurker if you want to. Interestingly, Leotheris has the highest percentage of successful pulls to kills ratio, aka the least wiped on boss in tier 5, even more so than Leotheris, albeit narrowly, who can delete your raid if you mess up the pull, which I've also never experienced. I thought Leotheris was going to be a bit more difficult as it's a very chaotic fight, and you have to have a warlock who performs the tanking role for a portion of it. But it seems as though people are well prepared and the boss goes down easily enough. Lurker lurking very close behind Leo at 10,400 clears, an easy enough encounter if somewhat of a pain for melee due to all the whirl spam, pretty simple case of ad control and laughing at people who get hit by spout. Patham Lords next at 10,324 clears. Council fights can often seem quite daunting, but you spread the bosses out and it's another fairly straightforward boss fight. You just have to hope that one Fathom Guard doesn't decide to win Fury or Tank out of existence, and it's at this point, after this boss, that numbers start to drop off rather quickly. Alar has 8,873 clears. The opening boss in Tempest Keep can prove a little tricky at first with frequent platform swaps, quills deleting melee before they hit the ground. I've had a death log where I took 4 damage and then 2 ticks of quills. It just seems really weird. And handling the flame buffet stacks, making sure tanks are in the right position. There's a lot more things that can go wrong on this encounter. Definitely a step up from other ones so far. Astromancer Solarian is next up with 8,555 clears, featuring quite high up on the kill list actually. Again, a simple enough fight where you have a soak group, but bad RNG with arcane missiles on the soakers, slow reactions for healings, health potions or health stones can lose you people very easily and eventually snowball the fight into a wipe. Though the final part of the fight, once the boss hits 20% and turns into a big Void Walker, is the easiest part of the fight by far. I can't think of many encounters where their big scary final form actually means you've already beaten it. So we have 3 bosses left, and there's no surprise who's going to be third. It's Morogrim with 7,794 clears. The big beefy boy will prove a test for your entire raid. It's a gear check for the tanks, a bit of discipline for the healers once Quake goes out not to instantly bash Circle of Healing and Chain Heal, and for DPS to keep Murlocs in check before the next set shows up. While not having the lowest pull per kill ratio, Morogrim has the highest pull count, being the cause of nearly 200,000 wipes, which means 2 bosses left. Now, it's worth a mention that early on, both of these fights were bugged, pretty badly at that, and that's going to count as a negative for the player base overall, and it will have made them more difficult than they should have been, and sometimes a kill would have been stolen due to something that should not have been able to happen. Regardless, the last 2 are unsurprisingly the M bosses, and they have a severe drop-off in the number of clears from everything so far. Second place goes to Lord of the Blood Elves, Leotheris, setting back quite a few raids, but the more controllable of the 2 M bosses, I would say. It's a long, grueling encounter, but one where everybody has a job, and things are quite predictable as for how it will go. It's very much the definition of a phase-by-phase fight. There's even a little bit of RP during each phase crossover, learning the advisors, getting used to the weapons and what they do, sorting out kick orders on the boss, priming damage on the shield or the eggs, dealing with flying during a fight. There's a lot going on, but if everyone pulls off their role, he will go down eventually. Which means the most difficult boss in tier 5 is Lady Vash with 2,093 clears. Another legendary multi-phase encounter, where it's different from Leotheris though, where each player has a job and is set up, but they have to be a little bit more flexible, knowing when to DPS ads, managing the cores and when you should be dunking them, calling where elites spawn and where the bog striders spawn, keeping up on elementals on all sides of the rooms, not outranging healers, or getting feared or getting cleaved. And then the final phase, the DPS portion of the fight. It can definitely be a close encounter in early weeks. If I learned one thing though, kill at least a few of the bats. Maybe you can out DPS them when we're deep in tier 5 or 6, but for the moment, kill them. The poison is real nasty. And then there's the infamous Mind Control and Vash, a pre-nerf mechanic that I'm not surprised they got rid of it. When druids get it and start spamming Life Bloom on the boss, paladins lay on hands it goes on a mage who pumps somebody, or an elemental shaman that chain lightnings the raid. Sometimes you just wipe on the fight and there's not much you could have done about it. And also, not to mention her rooting the entire melee group, followed up by a poison which can easily kill several players. Living action potions are a good counter. It's one final control phase in one very long control fight, but it feels super rewarding to get it down. So to answer the question, how hard is tier 5? Did a lower percentage of people manage to clear the content? Well, out of the 10,602 that killed Voidreaver, 2,093 of those guilds went on to clear Vash and clear all the content, which is 19.7%. 20 if we rounded up. I'm not sure if I rounded up for KT and Naxx at all. And if we went on an individual raid basis, about 25% of the people who killed Voidreaver also killed Leotheris. 19% of people who killed Hydros also killed Vash. So the results are, clearing tier 5 by the end of week 2 had the same proportion of guilds that had cleared Naxx by the end of week 2 in Classic. I wasn't expecting that, to be honest. I thought there'd be less, like a good 4 or 5% less. Tier 5 feels more difficult, and that it was more challenging. Maybe due to our smaller raid size now, it had a larger impact, as you'll have a greater number of performance-oriented players split among a greater number of guilds now. Maybe it was due to Naxx Rammers having encounters like Sapphiron, which just hard held people up until they could get enough resistance gear, but still, that's how things look. So if you're in a guild which is killing the M bosses in both raids at all at this point in time, you're doing pretty well for yourself. Surprised at the results? Think they're spot on? Let me know, and let me know how your progress is going as well. And if you're having some issues in the raid, well, it's not too surprising. A lot of people are. I'll be doing another one of these for tier 6. I think tier 6 is going to have a higher kill percentage than tier 5 personally. That's about it though. I hope you enjoy these. I think they're interesting to do and to get some kind of realistic impression of how difficult people are really finding the raids. As always guys, thank you so much for watching and listening in. I shall see you all in the next one very soon.